My girlfriend lied about her finances while I covered all our rent, so I ended things quietly and took control of my entire life. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and I thought I'd finally found someone I could trust completely. Emma was everything I'd been waiting for. She had this effortless charm, the kind that made people smile before they even realized it, and a bubbly energy that made every evening feel alive. From the very beginning, I felt drawn to her. Independence, or at least what she made me believe was independence. She talked about her dreams, about traveling, about living a life with little compromises, and somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that being the steady, responsible one was exactly what she needed. I was financially stable, working long hours, but enjoying the security it brought. I liked providing, seeing the relief on her face when bills were paid without a hitch, when rent was handled before the first of the month, when groceries and little luxuries were always stocked in the fridge. It felt natural. Loving her meant taking care of her. Right. And Emma, she always thanked me with a smile that made me feel like every late night, every skipped meal, every extra shift was worth it. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she'd say, leaning against my shoulder, soft and sweet. I told myself that loyalty, generosity, and emotional investment were the foundation of Lovand. I was building ours brick by brick, but there were little hints, tiny things I brushed off. A complaint about the rent being high, or the electric bill being too much this month. "Money's tight," she'd say, biting her lip, and I'd just nod, telling her it was fine, that I had it covered. Little murmurs, really, but I filed them away in the back of my mind, labeling them as temporary stress, minor frustrations of adulthood. Still, every time I looked at her laughing over coffee, or watching her curl up with a book on a Saturday morning, I felt proud. Proud that I could be the one she relied on, that I could give her a sense of stability I thought we both wanted. I didn't know then that the very thing I cherished, the trust, the comfort, the responsibility, was about to become the tool that would test me more than anything else in my life. At first, the red flags were so subtle I almost didn't notice them. Emma would talk about needing to transfer a bit of money for groceries or paying a friend back. But then somehow the transfers never came through, or she'd say, "Oh, I forgot, I'll do it tomorrow." I tried to be understanding. Life gets hectic, I told myself. She was juggling work and her social life, and I wanted to support her without making her feel guilty. But deep down, a tiny knot of doubt was starting to form in my chest. One, I kept quiet because I didn't want to ruin the happiness we had. Her lifestyle started showing cracks too. She'd post pictures of brunches or small shopping hauls, always smiling, always carefree. Once, she even mentioned a weekend trip she splurged on with a friend, casually dropping that she covered half, but her tone made it sound like she had barely stretched her budget at all. I remember thinking, she's just enjoying life. Why worry about the details? And yet, when I checked the bank balance after paying the rent and bills, there was always this nagging feeling something didn't add up. Friends started noticing too. One night over beers, a buddy of mine casually remarked, "Man, does she even help out at all? You're always paying." I laughed it off, brushing the comment aside, but it lingered longer than I expected. Could I really be that blind? I told myself I wasn't being taken advantage. If Emma just wasn't financially responsible yet, she'd figure it out with time. I was patient, supportive, the solid anchor in her whirlwind of charm. But every small inconsistency, every delayed transfer, every little complaint chipped away at me, even if I didn't fully realize it. I started noticing patterns: the way she avoided talking about her actual expenses, the way she joked about money being tight whenever I pressed. I dismissed it as stress or forgetfulness, convincing myself that love meant trusting, and trusting meant ignoring the little doubts. Yet, in the back of my mind, a voice whispered that things might not be as simple as they seemed, and I had no idea how right it was. By this point, I was fully invested body, mind, and wallet. I was working late nights, sometimes pulling double shifts, skipping dinners with friends, all to make sure our rent was covered and our apartment felt like a home. I didn't mind. I thought that's what love looked like. But the exhaustion was starting to creep in. I remember sitting at my kitchen table one night, receipts spread out like a map of my sacrifices, my back aching from hours hunched over spreadsheets, and thinking, am I doing this all for us? Or just for me to feel like a good partner? Emma would come home after her work, radiant, and laughing about her day. Sometimes mentioning little splurges, she treated herself to new shoes, a coffee subscription, weekend brunches. I'd smile, masking the tension, nodding as if I was completely fine with it. "You deserve it," I'd say, forcing a smile while my stomach twisted. And she would beam at me, completely unaware, maybe completely unconcerned about how much I was sacrificing behind the scenes. It should have felt rewarding, but instead, there was this creeping sense of imbalance. Like I was holding up more than my fair share of the world, and she was dancing lightly on top. Occasionally, she'd sigh about bills or drop a comment like, "I just wish I had more money to help out." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to chalk it up to the stress of adult life. "It's okay," I'd reply, patting her hand gently. "I've got it." But the knot in my chest was growing, tightening with every skipped payment from her side and every lavish little indulgence she claimed she had the money for. The emotional toll started showing in small ways: shorter patience, random irritability. Moments when I'd stare at her laughing with her friends and feel this pang of frustration I couldn't explain. I'd tell myself it was temporary, that love required sacrifice. But deep down, I knew something was off. That little voice in the back of my mind whispered warnings. Ignored only because I wanted to see the best in her. And I had no idea that ignoring it would only set the stage for something far worse. It started small, almost insignificant, but the unease was undeniable. One evening, I was scrolling through my bank app, just to double-check a transfer Emma had promised for the groceries. The money hadn't arrived. At first, I shrugged it off. Maybe she'd forgotten. Maybe the bank delayed it. But then I noticed a pattern. Transfers that were made, but never reflected. Small amounts she claimed she'd already paid. Bills, she insisted, were covered. Each time I asked, and each time, she had an explanation that sounded reasonable enough to quiet my doubts. "Oh, I must have mistyped, or the bank's slow today." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the unease settled like a stone in my chest. I started noticing little things: receipts in the trash, odd charges on her card, whispered mentions of her friends paying for things she'd told me she bought. I tried to confront her casually. "Hey, did you get that payment in?" Or, "I saw this charge. What was it for?" And she would smile, maybe a little too brightly, and brush it off with, "Don't worry about it. I've got it handled." Or, "You're overthinking again, babe." Her voice was calm, convincing, but there was a shift in the air. A tension I couldn't ignore. I remember that night vividly. I was sitting on the couch, the city lights spilling through our apartment window, quiet except for the hum of the heater. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to believe, to trust, to tell myself it was all fine. But the evidence was mounting, whispering a truth I wasn't ready to face. The thing that hurt most wasn't even the money, it was the realization that my trust, something I'd given freely, might have been misplaced entirely. I wanted to confront her fully, to demand honesty, but I held back. There was this fear creeping in. What if she lashed out? What if she denied everything? I tried to tell myself to be patient, to wait for the right moment. But deep down, I already sensed that the storm was coming, and I had no idea just how deep the lies went. By now, the tension between us was impossible to ignore. Emma's little jokes about money had turned into subtle pressures, almost guilt trips disguised as casual remarks. "If you really cared about me, you'd understand," she'd say sometimes, leaning in with that soft, pleading look. And I felt it pulled between my desire to support her and this growing unease gnawing at the edges of my mind. It was exhausting, emotionally and mentally. I was giving everything: my time, my energy, my money, yet each conversation left me questioning myself. Am I being unreasonable? Am I expecting too much? I tried to tell myself I was patient, that love meant bending sometimes. But it was more than bending. It felt like I was being stretched until I was unrecognizable. Every time she complained about bills or hinted at feeling stressed financially, I'd feel my stomach twist. I'd reassure her, "I've got it covered. Don't worry," and she would smile, that effortless, charming smile. While I felt a quiet frustration building, a storm of doubt that I didn't know how to release. There were moments when friends would notice the imbalance. One night I mentioned her latest shopping splurge, and a friend raised an eyebrow. "Man, are you sure she's pitching in at all?" I laughed, a little too loudly, dismissing it as nothing. But on the inside, a seed had been planted, a creeping suspicion that maybe I wasn't just being patient, I was being used. Then came the night I started paying attention to the patterns. The excuses, the delayed payments, the vague explanations, the constant "I'll take care of it tomorrow." It all formed a mosaic that I couldn't ignore. I tried to confront her gently. "Emma, can we talk about this? I feel like something's off." She tilted her head, feigned innocence, and said, "You're overthinking again, babe. Really, it's fine." Her voice was calm, almost convincing, but inside I knew it wasn't fine, and I had no idea that the truth I was sensing would soon hit harder than anything I'd prepared for. I should have seen it coming, but nothing prepares you for betrayal wrapped in someone you trust. One evening, I was sorting through our shared bills and receipts, just trying to make sense of our finances, when I stumbled across something that froze me in place. There it was, a transfer Emma had claimed she'd made weeks ago, one that never hit the account, and then another, and another, all carefully hidden, all contradicted by her own statements. My chest tightened, my hands trembled. I read each entry over and over, hoping I was misreading something, that it was a mistake, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. I confronted her quietly that night, trying to keep my voice steady. "Emma, these transfers you said you made, they never happened. Why didn't you tell me?" For a moment, she looked genuinely shocked, her eyes widening, but then she blinked and smiled. The charm, I thought, was trustworthiness, flickering like a candle in the wind. "I didn't want you to worry," she said softly, tilting her head. I was handling it. I didn't think it mattered. Her words were smooth, but her eyes betrayed a hint of calculation. I wanted to scream, to throw every frustration I'd bottled up for months at her. But something in me snapped in a quieter, colder way. I realized she hadn't just been careless, she'd been deliberately misleading me. Every smile, every playful comment about money, every "I've got this" line it had all been a lie. My loyalty, my patience, my sacrifices had been taken for granted. Sitting there in the dim light of our apartment, the city humming outside, I felt a rush of disbelief mixed with anger and heartbreak. I thought I knew her, thought I could trust her completely. And just like that, that foundation crumbled beneath me. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just stared at the documents. The evidence of months of deception laid bare before me. For the first time, the weight of everything I'd ignored hit me like a punch to the gut. And in that quiet, painful moment, I knew life as I'd been living it with her was over, and I had no idea how messy the aftermath would become. After that night, everything changed. The apartment, which once felt like home, now seemed like a cage. Every laugh, every casual comment Emma made felt like it had been rehearsed, designed to keep me blind. I started keeping track of every transaction, every little excuse, every delay. My patience was gone, replaced with this tight, cold focus. I wanted answers, clarity, but more than that, I wanted control over my own life again. I tried to talk to her, carefully, quietly, hoping to avoid a confrontation that would spiral. "Emma, I need honesty. Everything. No more half-truths," I said one evening, sitting across from her at the kitchen table. She tilted her head, feigned hurt, and whispered, "You're acting paranoid." "I'm not hiding anything. Why can't you trust me?" Her words stung worse than the lies themselves. I could feel the manipulation, the attempt to make me doubt myself even after everything I'd discovered. "You've changed," one of them said over lunch, and they were right. I was cautious, tense, always calculating, always aware of where my money was going, always questioning if I could ever relax around her again. Even small gestures from her, a touch on the shoulder, a smile across the room, felt suspect. I wanted to trust her, but my gut screamed danger. The pressure built in ways I couldn't escape. Every evening, I'd sit on the couch, staring at the city lights beyond our window, thinking about the months I'd spent covering everything while being misled. I felt trapped in my own generosity, suffocating under the weight of betrayal that had been quietly accumulating for so long. And yet, I still hadn't acted. I hadn't ended things. I wanted to, I knew I should, but part of me was waiting for the perfect moment, waiting for the right words, waiting to be sure that walking away wouldn't break me completely. Little did I know, that moment of clarity, of decision, was closer than I imagined, and the fallout would hit harder than anything I'd yet experienced. It all came crashing down one night when I finally realized just how deep the deception went. I'd been double-checking our shared accounts again, the numbers blurring together under the harsh glow of my laptop screen. When I discovered a pattern I hadn't fully grasped before, Emma hadn't just lied about 1 or 2 payments, she had been systematically covering nothing at all, while spending freely on things I didn't even know about. My heart sank. I felt every ounce of betrayal at once. A weight pressing down that made it hard to breathe. I confronted her, voice trembling but firm. "Emma, this isn't just a mistake anymore. You've been lying about everything. I've been covering everything for months, while you spent like none of it mattered." For a moment, she didn't respond. Then came the sigh, the tilt of her head, the fake innocence that used to charm me. "You're being dramatic. I told you I had it handled." "You're overreacting," she said, brushing it off like I was imagining it all. I felt a mix of rage and despair, a crushing realization that I had been completely manipulated. Every late night, every skipped dinner with friends, every sacrifice I'd made had all been used against me, taken for granted. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to make her feel even a fraction of the helplessness I felt. But I couldn't. I was numb, sitting there in the dim apartment, the hum of the heater filling the silence. I felt like a fool for trusting her so blindly. My loyalty had been weaponized. My love had been exploited. I realized I had 2 choices: continue to let her control my life, or finally take control myself, even if it meant ending everything we'd built. And in that moment, staring at the evidence of months of lies, I understood that the decision wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming myself. And I had no idea how hard it would be to do it quietly, without the drama she would have expected. I knew what I had to do, and for the first time in months, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to let her charm or guilt manipulate me one last time. I would end things quietly, deliberately, on my own terms. The apartment was silent that evening, the city lights casting long shadows across the walls, and I felt the weight of months of betrayal lifting slightly as I prepared myself. "Emma, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but soft. She looked up, smiling slightly, like she expected something playful, a minor spat she could twist into my fault. I continued, "I've realized this isn't working. I can't keep supporting us while being misled about everything. I think it's best if we end things." Her smile faltered, confusion crossing her face, but she quickly masked it. "What are you talking about?" "You're overreacting," she said, tilting her head like she always did when trying to manipulate the situation. I ignored it. I stayed calm, repeating only what needed to be said. "It's done, Emma. I can't live like this anymore." There was no shouting, no dramatic exit, just a quiet, firm declaration that shifted the power back to me. Her eyes widened, and for a moment I saw panic, then anger, and then resignation, like she hadn't expected me to actually act. The room felt strangely light after that, as if the very act of saying it aloud released months of tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I packed a few personal things that night, calmly separating my life from hers, feeling a sense of control return with every item I placed in the box. I didn't look back, and I didn't argue as I walked out into the cool night air. The streets quiet around me, I felt something I hadn't in months: freedom. But I knew the real work: rebuilding, healing, reclaiming every part of my life that had been overshadowed by her. Deception was just beginning, and I didn't yet know just how much clarity and empowerment this quiet act would give me. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The apartment that had been heavy with tension now felt empty in the best possible way. I started with the basics: closing joint accounts, transferring my funds to my personal account, and setting up a budget that was entirely under my control. Every transaction I made after that felt like reclaiming a little piece of myself I'd given away without realizing it. It wasn't just money, it was freedom, autonomy, the ability to make decisions without walking on eggshells. I threw myself into routines that had been neglected. I cooked for myself, went to the gym, even started catching up with friends I hadn't seen in months. The little things mattered: the smell of coffee in the morning, the quiet of my apartment before anyone else was awake, the simple satisfaction of paying a bill and knowing I had done it entirely for myself. Each act, mundane as it seemed, rebuilt a foundation of self-reliance that Emma had chipped away at. There was anger, of course. Sometimes I'd sit on the couch and replay months of manipulation, wondering how I hadn't seen it sooner. But it was accompanied by something stronger: clarity. I realized that the sacrifices I had made, the patience I had shown, were never mistakes. They were lessons. Lessons about boundaries, about trusting my instincts, about valuing my own well-being above someone else's charm. I even began making small plans for the future, investing in myself, in experiences I'd put off, in hobbies I'd neglected. It felt like waking up after a long, suffocating sleep. The world outside my apartment suddenly seemed full of possibility, not burdened by lies. And every evening when the city lights reflected off my window, I allowed myself a quiet smile. I had survived the manipulation, the deception, and the emotional drain. I had taken control, and I knew that, whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms, no one else's. Sitting alone one evening, I finally allowed myself to reflect on everything that had happened. The months of manipulation, the endless financial strain, the quiet frustration I had carried, it all hit me at once. I realized how much I had ignored my own instincts, how often I'd brushed off small red flags because I wanted to believe in her. That desire to see the best in someone had cost me more than money. It had cost me peace of mind. But acknowledging that didn't make me bitter, it made me wiser. I thought about the lessons learned, painfully but clearly. Boundaries aren't optional, they're essential. Trust has to be earned, not assumed. And generosity, as much as I valued it, needed limits. Giving without accountability invites exploitation. I understood now that my loyalty was a gift, but gifts don't have to come at the expense of self-respect. These lessons felt heavy but empowering, like tools I could use to rebuild a life stronger than before. Sometimes I imagined Emma reaching out, trying to justify herself or even reconcile. I knew I could have forgiven her, maybe even rationalized it all in my head. But I also knew that forgiveness didn't mean returning to the same imbalance. I wouldn't let her charm or guilt manipulate me again. My past patience had taught me one thing: I deserved honesty and reciprocity, and I would no longer settle for less. Even the small moments carried weight: the freedom to spend my money without fear, the ability to plan my evenings without checking her schedule, the relief of knowing I wasn't responsible for someone else's decisions. It all added up. Every day felt like reclaiming a little more of myself, bit by bit. And as I looked ahead, I felt a quiet confidence growing inside me. I knew I'd face challenges, that future relationships might carry risk. But I also knew I now had the clarity, the strength, and the experience to navigate them without losing myself. The past had hurt. Yes, but it had also taught me something no one could ever take away. By the time a few months had passed, I could finally see the full picture of what I'd endured and what I had gained. The apartment was quiet in a way that felt restorative, each evening filled with my own thoughts instead of tension or manipulation. I had rebuilt my routines, strengthened my financial independence, and, most importantly, I had reclaimed my sense of self. It was empowering in a way I hadn't expected. Betrayal had forced me to grow, to set boundaries, and to recognize my own worth. I found joy in small victories, paying bills without worry, planning weekends that were truly mine, reconnecting with friends who reminded me of who I was before all of this. I even started exploring personal goals I'd set aside, things I had neglected while trying to sustain a relationship that had been quietly draining me. Every step, no matter how minor, felt like proof that I could thrive without being manipulated. Without sacrificing myself for someone else's charm or deception. There were moments of reflection, 2 brief flashes of anger or sadness, but they were tempered with clarity. I no longer questioned my instincts or my decisions. I understood the value of trust, and more importantly, I understood the value of vigilance. I had been deceived, yes, but I had also learned how to protect myself, and that knowledge was liberating. And then, one evening, as I watched the city lights shimmer through my window, I smiled quietly to myself. I was free, not just from the lies, not just from the manipulation, but from the fear of being exploited, from the endless questioning of my own judgment. I had walked through betrayal, through frustration, through heartbreak, and come out stronger, wiser, and fully in control of my life. I didn't need vindication, and I didn't need closure from her. My closure was in this moment, in this quiet empowerment, in knowing that I had chosen myself and my life, and for the first time in a long time, I felt whole again.